Oh, this is actually the era of Kong that I was not looking forward to talking about at all, but I'm here. I can't go without reviewing these movies, so let's just get into it. This is the 1976 remake of King Kong, produced by Dino De Laurentiis, and stars Jeff Bridges and Jessica Lange in her feature film debut. The movie is essentially a remake of the original 1933 one, but has a few differences here and there. Instead of a film crew, it follows an oil company who want to head to Skull Island to basically drain it of its oil. You know, because that's all we care about in America. Along the way, a scientist, played by Jeff Bridges, stows away onto the ship, and they come across a drifter, played by Jessica Lange, and the two of them accompany the oil company to Skull Island. How many times can I say company? So eventually they reach Skull Island, and the rest of the movie plays out just like the original. Jessica Lange is kidnapped by the natives and is sacrificed to their god Kong, and they go in to save her, and that leads into Kong being taken back to New York City. Now, the last American-made King Kong movie was back in 1933 with King Kong and Son of Kong in the same year. And before this movie, Kong had an interesting film career. In 1960, Willis O'Brien, the stop-motion animator for the original Kong, Son of Kong, and Mighty Joe Young, came up with an idea where King Kong would fight a monster created by Dr. Frankenstein. Basically, it would be a King Kong-sized Frankenstein monster, but for some reason, the idea never went through. The script got tossed around from several studios, so it eventually went to Toho, and they replaced the Frankenstein monster with their own monster, Godzilla, and thus King Kong vs. Godzilla was created. I've already reviewed this movie on my old channel back in 2013, so you can check out that review and see what my opinion is on that movie. And then Toho made another movie with King Kong called King Kong Escapes. This one I reviewed during Toho month of last year on this channel, so you can go check that out. So while King Kong had two movies in Japan, the last domestic Kong movie was actually with the original. There were no King Kong movies until this remake came out. And I remember seeing this on VHS as a kid, sometime after I saw the original, and I remember not liking it. Part of the reason is because my dad talked so much shit about this movie while adoring the original, so I just kind of took his word on it. And since then, I really didn't care to watch this movie again until this review. And it's actually not as bad as I remembered it to be. It's not good. I'm never going to say it's a good movie. There are things in it that I actually do like. One of the things that I do give it points for are the differences that it makes, for better and for worse. One of the things that I cannot stand in remakes is when they do everything like the original, but don't do anything else to keep it fresh and new, and make it stand out from the original. Some fine examples of this are the remake of Psycho, Friday the 13th, and Nightmare on Elm Street. And yes, I know technically Friday the 13th was a hybrid remake of parts 1, 2, and 3, but really it doesn't do anything to stand out from the originals. But when a remake does something new and different, then I'll at least give it points. One prime example of that is the remake of Halloween by Rob Zombie. It's not a good movie at all. I think it's downright terrible, but I at least give it props for having a different tone and style to it. Whether or not that hurt the movie is up for debate, but I at least give it credit for the different tone. And I can say the same thing for Kong. It's set in a different time period, the characters are different, there are some scenes that are different or not in the original, but it still feels like a King Kong movie. It's not like with Roland Emmerich's Godzilla, or Zilla, where it's so different, it's not even faithful to the source material. And I know I've said that a lot in several other videos, but there's no other way I can describe it. So I do give it points for having a few differences from the original, but at the same time, every change that it makes doesn't make it truly stand out from the original. The original will still overshadow this movie, and there's no scene in this movie to make you go, wow, that was really memorable. But before I go into the negatives, I want to talk about the positives. King Kong here is created through miniatures and suitmation, and the suit is actually pretty cool at times. Unlike the Toho movies, this suit actually has expression to it. You can tell what this Kong is thinking, there are points where you feel sorry for him, and there are some special effects shots that are actually damn impressive. There's one scene during Kong's rampage in New York where it's a bird's eye view, and you see Kong stomping on a bunch of people, and it actually looks damn cool. Even today, as mediocre as this movie is, that effect shot still holds up. But then you have points with the Kong suit that look downright creepy. It just delves into the uncanny valley where you're just like, ooh, Kong is so expressive that it's actually kind of creepy to watch. Like the one scene where he's drawing Jessica Lange's character, and he just has these giant balloon cheeks every time he blows, like it looks so much bigger than how it would look when you normally blow. It's just, I don't know, it's weird. It's just downright weird. Jeff Bridges does have some charisma. His character may not be all too interesting, but at least there is some charm to him. And if you just kind of took this in as a prequel to Big Lebowski, especially with his introduction scene, it could very much be his same character from The Big Lebowski. Okay, I'm just stretching, but the point is, in the beginning when we're introduced to his character, he does act like Jeff Lebowski would, but the rest of the movie, he pretty much acts like Hooper from Jaws, and he's pretty much that young scientist stereotype, and doesn't really stand out all that much. And now for the bad. For as good as the special effects can be at times, there are some points where it's just really fake and unconvincing. When they have to build sets of Skull Island, sometimes it looks like they just found old sets from the 1950s and just recycled that, because there are many points in this movie where they'll shoot on location or they'll film in sets, and it looks really inconsistent. The location shots are actually really cool and really believable because they're actually in a location, but then when you go to a soundstage, it looks so fake. Like the rocks and leaves look like rubber and plastic. It's just unconvincing. Also, this Skull Island is incredibly underpopulated. If you remember in the 1933 movie, Skull Island was alive. It had birds flying around, it had creatures roaming around, and it was just so unique. In this Skull Island, there's just Kong and a giant snake. That's it. No other creatures inhabit Skull Island. And there's only one scene where Kong fights a giant creature, and it's the giant snake that I referenced, which is very unconvincing because you're just watching some guy in a suit play around with some rubber snake rather than seeing two guys in suits fighting each other. If they had built a T-Rex suit and had the T-Rex and Kong fight each other, that would have been really entertaining. It would have been like the Gorosaurus fight in King Kong Escapes. But no, we only get two creatures in Skull Island. One of them is just a rubber prop. Now back to the human characters. Let's talk about Jessica Lange first. This is the first movie she's ever been in, and her character is just really ditzy. There are moments where she is likable, but on the whole, you don't really have much of a reason to fear for her. She's kind of an idiot, and really does fit the dumb blonde stereotype. And there are two things that really irritate me. One is that she's mainly in this movie to be a sex object. She's only there for eye candy, and while I'm not really complaining about that as a straight man, because this movie takes every opportunity to put her in the tightest clothes possible. There's even one scene right before the rubber snake fight where Kong removes her top, and if you go frame by frame, you can kind of see her nipple. This is like the equivalent in Jaws, where it's a PG movie, but you still see female nudity. It is a bit sexist, since she really doesn't do a whole lot in this movie. She's not proactive, she's not even all that charming or likable when you compare her to Fay Wray or Naomi Watts in the Peter Jackson remake, which we'll get to in a couple of weeks. It's also worth noting that one of the actresses that auditioned for this role was Meryl Streep. The only reason she didn't get it was because she was supposedly too ugly for the role, which, you know, they made the right choice, because Meryl Streep has become, as we all know, one of the best actresses, if not the best, working in Hollywood, and she is miles, miles above this movie. She's too good for it. Her relationship with Kong here is all over the place. Both the Peter Jackson remake and the original 1933 film established a relationship between Kong and the damsel in distress, and they stuck with it. This movie tries to make the relationship a little more progressive, but ultimately it just flip-flops from Jessica Lange being scared of Kong, to feeling sympathy for Kong, to hating Kong. And it just flip-flops back and forth as the movie progresses. It doesn't evolve. It just goes from, oh, she's mad at Kong. Oh, she feels sympathy. Oh, she's scared. Oh, wait, she's back to being mad. She's back to being scared. It's just pick a tone, pick a relationship, and stick to it or develop it. It's not that hard to do. As for the rest of the human characters, you don't remember any of them. I guess the next most memorable character in this movie is probably the boss or the CEO of the oil company. The only reason you remember him is because he's a goddamn cartoon character who talks with his teeth closed like, "Get me that giant gorilla, we're headed back to New York, we'll put him on display." I'm just making up dialogue because that just goes to show how uninspired this movie is. So, I mean, if you watch it, you'll understand how cartoony he is. And to really put a cherry on top of his cartoonish attitude, he puts King Kong in a cage with a gigantic crown. If that doesn't scream a cartoon character, I don't know what does. Lastly, the ending. There's not much to say about the ending. It's just Kong on top of the World Trade Center, and he's fighting helicopters instead of airplanes. And if you remember back to the original, you really did feel sorry for him when he met his end. But in this movie, not so much. And you don't really feel the impact of his death, because when he falls off the World Trade Center, they basically superimpose Kong into a shot of the World Trade Center, and it looks like he's floating down to the ground. Whereas in the original, yeah, it was shot at a distance and Kong is just a little ragdoll, but when Kong hits the side of the Empire State Building, you're just like, ooh! And you feel the impact of his fall. It may be cheesy in the original, but at least you felt something, whereas in this one, it's cheesy, and it's just cheesy. You don't feel anything. So on the whole, I don't hate this movie like I did beforehand, but there's nothing about it that I can say makes it good. It's just okay overall. So I would ultimately say watch this movie at your own risk. There are a few scenes in here that are worth seeing, and some really cool special effects shots here and there. And I guess if you want to see Jessica Lange in really tight clothes, then watch this movie. But on the whole, there's nothing memorable about it. You'll just forget about it in a day. And it's just never going to leave an impact on you, so just watch it at your own risk. Not a terrible movie, but not good either. And that's my review for the 1976 remake of King Kong. Now, I'm going to end on two notes. I'm going to end on the best thing that came out of this remake and the worst. The best thing that came out of this remake were two really kick-ass King Kong attractions at Universal Studios Hollywood and Universal Studios Florida, both of which are gone. Rest in peace, Kongfrontation and King Kong Encounter. And the worst thing to come out of this remake was its atrocious sequel, King Kong Lives, which sadly still exists, and we're going to talk about that next week. So until then, I hope you enjoyed this review. Leave a comment down below and tell me what your thoughts are on the 1976 King Kong, if and when you've seen it. And as always, this is the real Mr. Robinson telling you there is only one.